So, as with most programs involving high-tech cameras and an FBI database, the need for the programs is often said to stem from the need for greater safety and security. On the FBI's own website, it says the mission of the NGI is to reduce terrorist and criminal activities by improving and expanding biometric identification and criminal history information services through research, evaluation, and implementation of advanced technology within the IAFIS environment. So I want to talk about what this actually means with the woman who just did that report for us, Adriana Ucero. She joins me now to delve into the issue.
Christine.
Some interesting things there, and you really put it into perspective with the surveillance cameras that we even have all over our
Glad
newsroom.
everyone enjoyed.
Yeah. Do you think this is the trend of the future?
I mean, it looks like it, definitely. I mean, we're seeing this just as technology is moving forward. I mean, even right now, private companies are trying to track your every move and even anticipate what you're going to do next. So it really comes down to, yes, all signs point to that.
And I know that it was really interesting that you used the example of Facebook in your report.
Yes, scary.
Anyone who's on Facebook, I remember that first time I saw that feature when Facebook
absolutely.
knew which ones of my friends were actually in the pictures before I even tagged them. Of course, once in a while getting it wrong, but for the most part kind of being
dead
right
set,
on.
right on. Yeah.
I mean, if that's what's being used on a regular person's Facebook, then you know what the FBI and what some of these governments are using must
a little bit more
be
sophisticated.
Much more sophisticated. Do you think that we're going to see pushback, though, from the public?
I mean, honestly, we already are in some cases. Like, there are some privacy advocacy groups, you know, our friends at Electronic Frontier Foundation, Epic, so on and so forth, have already come out against, you know, these types of softwares. And also on the Hill, funny enough, probably less than a month ago, Senator Al Franken himself was grilling Facebook and, you know, Facebook's lawyers over the use of this technology, especially the fact that it's not really disclosed to any of the users. So, in other words, as I mentioned beforehand, you are already submitting to all of this without really knowing the extent. Plus, what you should really be worried about is that data bank, because without anything to cross-reference, there you go, there's nothing. So you've seen a little bit, but at the end of the day, you know, does safety trump your privacy? That's sort of the question there.
And that's one thing, you know, when you go on Facebook, especially if you don't have the most secure of settings, you're choosing to give up that privacy. And for a lot of people in younger generations, I mean, this is just what they have always known. They have always known a world with status updates and Facebook and, you know, uploading cell phone pictures onto the internet.
Checking into where you are,
exactly.
all of these things. Yeah.
And, you know, we make choices to do this because we want our friends to know. But to what extent do you think, you know, if you're a 14-year-old uploading all your pictures and, you know, 10 years later, you're in a store when an armed robbery happens, I mean, what's to prevent, you know, the wrong associations from being made?
I mean, that really depends. I mean, taking an example of like the 14-year-old, you know, uploading pictures, obviously you have to, you are making that choice. And obviously, of course, you have to be smart about what you do on the internet. There's no question about that. But the question really isn't that. The argument is when it's happening without your knowledge or your consent. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
So if something's happening, for example, if you're just walking down the street, you know, there's a camera, it takes your picture, and then it cross-references with something, with a database from, you know, I don't know, from you were in LA, for example, and then you went to New York. There's someone tracking your move. Why? I mean, there are arguments to be made on both sides, but it comes down to, are you consenting to that? That is the big issue.
Well, and I think largely across the board, the answer to that question is no. The majority of people whose faces are put into the database not only are not consenting to it, they have no idea it's going on. And yet this program has been in the works in some of these cities that you mentioned for more than a year now. Is that right?
Absolutely. It absolutely has. But I mean, going back to something you said beforehand, I mean, there is something to be said, be remiss if I don't mention, you know, security.
Right.
There is something to be said about being smart, being able to, you know, identify those threats and being able to secure, you know, the homestead. That's absolutely a valid point. However, the very big issue is, and what I've seen and sort of talked about with other people here in this office, and that I've interviewed beforehand, the problem is to what extent are you giving up your privacy in order to be safe? So that is I
think that's the million-dollar question.
Exactly.
Right there. Adriana, I want to get to something else you talked about in your package, and that is Trapwire.
Yeah.
Trapwire is something that we kind of laid out the groundwork for, kind of explained to our viewers just a few days ago.
Yeah, we were one of the first ones to, I mean, if you go online right now, not to sort of, but shall we? I mean, we were one of the first ones to really cover that in depth. Absolutely.
And this is a program that was really sort of released in some documents on WikiLeaks just last week. Talk a little bit about Trapwire for those people who don't know, and the concept also of sort of outsourcing this activity.
I mean, it's pretty much what we know for certain is that it's a private company that has its own software, its own cameras, all of this, that is in DC, in New York, in LA, and I think I'm missing, in Las Vegas. So what we do know is that it just, keeps tabs and on security. So in theory, it is supposed to keep you and I safe. So if we're in New York and there's some suspicious activity, that should be the first thing to raise a red flag. However, the problem comes with it's a private company. So it's not the government doing this, it's a private company. So they're taking all that information and storing it somewhere.
Right.
Where? What's happening with it?
Yeah.
What's
interesting
so
too that private company is made up largely of former, FBI and CIA
no, we can go
top
down
officials,
the rabbit hole. Absolutely.
Certainly a lot to talk about. A really neat way that you laid it out in your report. Adriana Uzzera, thank you so much.
Night.